Well, good morning, everybody. This is Gulf Harbour Radio, and this is Patricia and David, as we are here every morning, Monday to Friday, until I think the end of this week. There doesn't seem to be too many people out there now, so what we might do is finish at the end of this week. But we know that there are quite a few of you on your way north, and I tell you what, you wouldn't want to be in New Zealand at the moment, so good that you're heading north from Fiji or wherever to go to the beautiful warm waters of the Marshall Islands. We did that one year. Actually, we didn't go north though. We came west because we did it coming from Bora Bora and slowly worked our way across and then up to arrive in the Marshall Islands on Christmas Eve. I remember that. It was a bit of a stormy Christmas Eve up there. We certainly had a high-speed approach to Marjaro, but it was a beautiful spot to be after that with its warm water. You don't get that in New Zealand. All right, well, what have we been doing weekend-wise? We had a beautiful weekend and not so great this morning. It's 16 degrees here. Boy, that's a bit nippy for those that have come from the islands. It's a bit drizzly. It's not drizzling at the moment, but it has been drizzly. 4 knots from the southwest. The old southwest wind does bring its misery. 1006.6 and dropping. So not a very good start to the week, but a working week. Dinnerau, good morning, Vandy, sunny and calm. Well, it's calm here, believe it or not. We can share that. 4 knots is not very much, is it? But yes, the weekend was absolutely delightful for those folk that managed to get away. All right, we have a bit of news, although I'd have to say there's not a great deal of news because this is holiday week in America. It's Thanksgiving, so they're doing things like getting the Christmas tree to the White House and choosing which turkey doesn't get its neck chopped off and other good stuff like that. Mr. Trump is going to, well, he is actually in California looking at the damage from the wildfires. Just terrible damage there. So he's having a look at that before he goes home to share a turkey, a different turkey, not the one that got let off. We've got a bit of weather. I'm not sure that David looks very happy about it, but a weather coming up shortly to talk about how you might get to New Zealand this year. Maybe not, but anyway, he'll talk about that later. And certainly he'll cover the weather going north. For those folks that are heading to better weather. And good morning to Diego and Marina up there in the Bay of Islands at Urapuka. 16 degrees there too, in a westerly. So I bet they're still in bed. In fact, I'm surprised to see that Diego's actually up with the computer. Maybe he's got the computer in bed. All right, let's do a little bit of news such as it is. It's been pretty grim weekend in New Zealand, or week in New Zealand. As well, but over the weekend, 7 people were killed on the roads. It's just been a horrific year, and a good warning for everybody that's come to New Zealand expecting the roads and the driving standards to be the same as what you left back in whatever country you came from, apart from India maybe. But boy, the roads are not good and the driving's not good here, so do be careful. 7 dead in one weekend is a pretty bad statistic. We have actually weird weather here in New Zealand at the moment. There was a massive twister down in Canterbury. We don't get those very often in New Zealand, but a massive twister and hail in Dunedin, believe it or not. The South Island, if you've seen our weather map, some of you won't have, but boy, there's just a lot of crunch and troughs and lows and just a lot of misery around for those people that think it's actually summer. Over at the ditch in Australia, a man died after being stung by a stingray off the coast of Hobart, Tasmania. Had a heart attack. For some reason, the sting produces something that gives a heart attack. Whoever was the reporter on the news didn't actually know much about stingrays because they showed a picture of a manta ray at the lead for the article. But anyway, he was only 32, I think. So a good strong person, but did not survive that sting. The sporting weekend for New Zealand wasn't very good, but if you're Irish, you'll be very, very happy to know that Ireland won the All Blacks match 16-9. It was a very it wasn't just a fluke, it was an excellent game from the Irish, and just a very poor game from New Zealand, so they didn't deserve to win. And the Black Ferns, the female side of the rugby world, they lost to France. I think it's the first time they've lost in about 18 months. And they lost 30-27. So not a good weekend in Europe for the people playing rugby for New Zealand. Last week, this is to show that even expert people can mess up. Last week we mentioned that a Norwegian warship had collided with an oil tanker. He was doing navigational exercises on the way back from a NATO exercise. Well, it's gone from bad to worse. He drove the warship up on a couple of rocks to stop it doing anything that it shouldn't do, like fall to the bottom of the sea. And when they attached all the cables to the frigate and put some stress on it, the cables snapped, and now virtually all you can see is a few antennas and the very top of the frigate. It's one of only 5 that the Norwegian Navy have, so everyone's not very happy in Norway because the cost of getting it to the surface evidently is about the same as buying a new one, and whatever it is, it's incredibly expensive. So things are not very cheerful in the military in Norway at the moment. Mr. Bainimarama, he's actually in New Zealand at the moment because his brother died, but he has retained power in the Fiji elections. Not by a hell of a lot, I might add. He got 50.02% of the vote, so his party got 27 out of 51 parliamentary seats. Mr. Rambuka's group got 21, and there were 3 from, I can't remember what they're called, but the others. So anyway, Mr. Bainimarama looked fairly cheerful about the fact that he will retain power in Fiji. In the UK, Prime Minister May has a very, very tough week this week. They don't think she'll survive, but anyway, we'll see what happens there. I don't think they've got much alternative, really. It'll be a bit chaotic over there in the UK with this whole Brexit wrangle. So she's got a tough week ahead of her. The US, as I mentioned, are in holiday mode, so they couldn't care less what happened in the world at Thanksgiving this week. And the Argentinian submarine, it's another one. It went down missing, in fact, a year ago, almost to the day, but they have now found it, unfortunately, 915 meters down in Patagonia, so it's virtually impossible to get at. But there were 44 people on board, so at least they know where they are now. So there you have it. All right, and a report has come in from Vavau. Good morning to Y2K. Max, cloudy, light wind from the east, 1006 megabytes, I was going to say, millibars. It's Monday morning, folks. And I tell you what, the whole of the South Pacific, apart from New Zealand, looks actually quite pleasant. So enjoy it, because it's certainly not very pleasant here.
What's his pressure?
His pressure is 1006. So the other place you would not want to be is in the Caribbean at the moment. It has been swamped by seaweed. Foul-smelling sargassum has just piled up from Belize to Barbados and all of the tourist beaches. It absolutely stinks. There's definitely quite a gas coming off it. They reckon it's because there's a lot more nutrients in the sea coming in from winds from Africa, nutrients from North American farms probably, and of course the one that they always blame, climate change.
Oh, for God's sake.
I knew you'd like that. So it's not a place to go for a holiday if you want to actually get into the water, because you have to wade through an awful stench of seaweed there at the moment. Okay, that's about it from me, and we've got David here sitting to talk to what few of you are around at the moment. Probably many of you, if you're in New Zealand, are still in bed trying to keep warm. but others are looking at the weirdo weather and wondering how you're going to actually get back to New Zealand if that's where you're wanting to come. So I'm going to pass the microphone and we'll see what he's got to say.
Well, good morning. Yeah, I have to sort of jab myself to stay awake too. It's just one of those days you look outside and it's cloudy, drizzly, and just kind of makes you want to roll back to sleep. Anyway, here we go again, another week in paradise for you guys, at least for those up in the islands. Looking at satellite imagery, well, last night I took a very good look at what was going on. All the island groups last night looked pretty decent. Now this morning, at 500 millibar, we have a ridge to the east of New Zealand. Get you up to date on the upper levels here. And over in New Zealand itself, I'm afraid we have a shortwave trough. But just to the west of that, yet another ridge. So looking at the resultant surface analysis, and I think you all know now what causes what when we talk about upper levels. But anyhow, we have a 1024 high that's just to the east of New Zealand, and that's supported by the upper ridge I talked about. But our nasty little shortwave trough has generated a complex low system. The actual, if you could make a center of this complex, so remember that's an area of multiple low centers. So if you were to try to stab the center of all of these low centers, it would be just southeast of New Zealand. And we've got a series of troughs, though, over the country, and they're running north over the South Island and the North Island as well. In fact, that's where our cloud and drizzle is coming from. Then moving over to the Tasman, we find the next high, and that one's fairly strong at 1029 millibar, and the high does ridge north, right along the Oz coast, all the way up to the Coral Sea, trying to nudge New Caledonia as well. Now, the trough system over New Zealand should continue through Wednesday, so we have a couple of days of this. Then on Thursday, we've got I'd say a narrow ridge moves over the country, and that is ahead of the next front that's approaching from the Tasman. So those yachts that are approaching New Zealand, southwest winds prevail, but they shift to the northwest on Tuesday, tomorrow, and rising Wednesday up to about 25 knots, and then they ease on Thursday westerly about 15. Now, for those who want to leave this week for New Zealand, I can't say things look particularly great. Light air at first up the islands, particularly Fiji, but plenty of headwinds as you head south. By Wednesday at 25 south, things are become variable. Mostly headwinds, I would say, but in any case, light air. So no doubt you'd be motor sailing through Wednesday, and that's doable. Just you'll be burning fuel. By Thursday, a high center does establish itself south of Vanuatu, just to the south of Vanuatu. So winds, I would say northwest to west around 25 south, and there'll be 15 knots or so. No strength in any of this. And a frontal band over New Zealand runs north to 25 south on Friday. Strong northwest winds just to the west of all of this, and southeast winds to the east of this band. Now on Saturday, we continue to have northwest winds over New Zealand. This is virtually a week from now. And Sunday, northwest from New Zealand all the way up to 25 south. And they're stronger now, 20 to 25 knots. So that is your week, unfortunately. Not great, I'm afraid. Now, those of you going north from Fiji today, you'll have light southwest to west winds once you get out through all the reefs and whatnot. You'll bump into troughing at about 10 south. By Wednesday, as you truck north, expect easterlies about 10 to 15 knots. And then south-southeast about 15 Thursday, and Friday we get easterlies again. And then on Saturday, a different air mass is bringing northeast winds into the picture. and by Sunday, still northeast, about 15 knots or thereabouts. That's the story then going north. And long range, looking at the Solomons area, and this is around the 1st and 2nd of December, it does look like there is a tropical disturbance forming up. Possibly a tropical cyclone may become of this. So it's a little too far out to tell, needless to say, but it is that time of the year, so I would not be surprised if that forecast is somewhat accurate. So up to the tropics then briefly, we have the trough that runs from the Solomons, again very common, common all year, but very common this time of the year. And remember that whole area is called the hot pool, and it's called the hot pool for a reason. All of the winds, all of the easterly quadrant winds are all pushing water to the west. So not only do we get sea level rise, not due to climate change, but due to winds pushing all this water to the west, and that's warmer water. So we do develop areas of low pressure because of that in that complete area, if you will. Now, that trough then continues east to a low pressure area, and this is the one that may develop into a tropical cyclone. That stays there, but the trough continues on to Rotuma, Futuna, grazes northern Tonga and Niue, and it heads on toward the southern Cooks. There is a second trough that lies over Tuvalu. It grazes Tokelau and Samoa as well. Then it continues east-southeast, and it also goes to the southern Cooks. So looking at Tonga, it's forecast to have cloudy periods today and maybe off and on light showers. On satellite imagery, things look pretty decent this morning. I'll give you the tides, low at 10:15 and high at 4:35 this afternoon. Now the actuals this morning, Bavau was quite cool. At 4 in the morning it was 18 C, but then it warmed up to about 20, I think at around 6 or 7 o'clock. And scattered to Broken, and the barometer at the airport 1008. The Hapais were calm, scattered to Broken there as well, barometer 1008 as well. And Tongatapu, virtually the same exact conditions as the Hapais. I won't bother to repeat it. Now, winds by lunch, north to northeast, I'd say 10 to 15. And tomorrow we're going to have a considerable shift, west to southwest, maybe 10 knots or so. And on Wednesday, another shift back to the east to southeast, about 10 knots. And later on, picking up a little bit, 10 to 15, not much at all. And Fiji, keep this one brief. It's a mix of fine weather to partly cloudy, really. We'll see occasional showers, especially in the afternoon, typical tropics. Wind west to southwest, 10 to 15 today and tomorrow. I see few returns on radar. Most of the returns are over Vanua-Levu, just to the north of there and to the east around Taveuni. This was early this morning. The rest of Fiji, just a light shower here and there, hardly any returns at all. So that's your story on Fiji. Vanuatu, the southern edge of the trough, does affect the northern bits. Cloud reaches south down to Malakula, but from there southward, imagery shows pretty fine conditions. And the winds today, light to moderate. By lunch, expect south-southeast to southeast, about 10 to 15. And tomorrow, southeasterlies, also 10 to 15. And New Day, this continues right through Wednesday, but about halfway across, the winds shift to northeasterly. And on Thursday and Friday, they continue backing so that we get north to northwest, getting up to 20 to 25 knots. And by Saturday, the winds northwest, all the way from Newcastle to the coast of Australia. And they'll be a good 20 knots, so a fair amount of breeze from Newcastle to Oz, particularly late in the week. And all this is part of cyclonic flow from the depression that is entering the Tasman at that time. Yeah, that's about the end of what I've got. We had a question this morning from Scoots, and they asked a pretty good question about. They were talking about the frequency of highs and lows. They've been seeing the last couple of weeks up in the islands. In other words, the lows appear to be a little bit more frequent, and they want to know what happened to the 7-day cycle. We talk about that a lot. 7 days between highs or 7 days between lows, however you want to look at it. Well, that's really, I don't want to say a tongue-in-cheek sort of a thing, but it's just an approximation. It is all it really is. So to begin with, at the moment, this time of the year, every year usually, we are in a transition period. November particularly, it's always a very tricky month for any passage making. That's why you see a lot of boats leaving early or a lot of boats leaving late, particularly Kiwi boats that sometimes even leave New Zealand late and don't come back until the December time period. Now, what does all this? Well, it's the sun. The sun plays a huge, huge role as it's moving south. And that, of course, is where all the heat energy comes from. Now, in fact, where we are up on this ridge, we spot where the sun sets, and it's incredible how far south it's come. It almost seems like it's accelerated. Of course, it hasn't, but the appearance is that it's really zoomed south in the last 2 or 3 weeks. So, anyway, the other thing is the ENSO cycle. That plays a very, very big role in what's happening. Right now, it's still neutral. It does lean towards El Nino at the moment, but it is not El Nino yet. But if we do go into an El Nino, it probably will be very mild and very short-lived. And everything is connected. The heat of the ocean, the land heat, there's just a myriad of other cycles that we haven't talked about other than ENSO that play a role in what kind of weather that we're going to get. The climatologists just, they're like pigs and poo when they talk about the different cycles and whatnot. But what we're experiencing now is really not that unusual, but it does make passage planning a little bit difficult. As I said, all weather is driven by the sun, and that directly or indirectly changes the frequency and the intensity of the long and short wave troughs and ridges at 500 millibar. That's what makes the weather. And the higher up jet stream, that becomes sort of the dividing line between the different air masses. So if you're really interested in looking at that, you look at frogs for the 500 millibar, and you can get a feel for how frequent these lows and highs are going to come. All I can say is things are probably going to stabilize in December. There'll be plenty of windows yet to come home on, so just be a little bit patient. The only thing you have to worry about are tropical cyclones, but again, they usually aren't going to be showing up until after the first of the year. Now, we've already had 2, so that sort of puts pay to that remark, but they've been very mild and haven't amounted to a hill of beans. And also, we are still in what we call here in New Zealand the equinoctial gale period. Now, I know it's not the equinox, and why we call it the equinoctial gale period, I'm not so sure, but that is what we call it. And it's in this period that you get all these variations of highs and lows, and it's always been that way. So we had another question that came in. I'll read it. Any indication that things will settle down in Fiji to New Zealand after this big storm later in the week? Oh, this is from Scoots too?
Yes.
Scoots is getting desperate. Well, 737s will get you here. Yeah, I don't know if you're desperate because of you just are getting tired of the heat or what, but I don't see anything through November. Now, what I just gave you for this week, that's not a very, very good passage whatsoever. If you were desperate, you could probably make it to New Zealand and that. You'll get beat up a little bit, but you could do it. Now, I looked at, well, the only model that really goes out over 300 hours is GFS. And anything that goes out that far, you have to take with a grain of salt. And I've looked out over 380 hours, and I really don't see anything that excites me. As you know, I like to see a high sitting over New Zealand and a high in the Bight, and I'm hardly even seeing that. I think for 1 or 2 days it looks like that, and then things sort of pack up again. So it's not looking that spectacular, but again, you have to decide what you're willing to put up with. Most important is your arrival weather. If you really want to do it, then pay particular attention to the couple of days around your estimated arrival and see what that weather is going to be. It could get very, very nasty around New Zealand when you've got a fairly significant frontal band that's coming through. But summer is coming, and the cyclones themselves are the tropical depressions, not the tropical, but the subtropical depressions, probably won't be as severe during this period, so there may be a chance. So we'll keep looking at it this week, and you do your homework, all of you that want to get south, and if you want, give me an ETA, what you think your ETA is going to be, and I'll be happy to look at other models that maybe you're not able to get, and see what kind of a consensus we could get. I'll be happy to do that. So that's the story. And any other questions come now?
Well, there's Trigger, and I would just add that Scoot said they're not desperate, but they are interested and curious. Trigger, good morning, Chris. Go ahead. Okay, so you're looking at next Monday, and on the GFS it shows a low, so he'll just have a look at other stuff that he's got here and see if he sees the same thing. I'll give him a chance to talk about that. And was there anybody else? Actually, I'll give him a chance to look at that, or whatever it is that he's looking at. So stand by, Chris. Is there anybody else? Not sure if there's anybody else there. I might need a relay if it's anybody heading north from Fiji, but I'll pass the microphone just to see what David says about next week.
Well, the only thing other than the low that I believe you're talking about, there is another one that's showing up at around 290 hours, almost 300 hours, and it doesn't look like much. It's sandwiched between two highs, about the latitude of North Cape, really. This depression, very, very small in area and not a lot of wind in it. You could sail through that probably if you had to. So what you need to do is to give me an idea as to what it is that you're planning on. Now, the nastiest looking one is really the weekend, the Saturday, Sunday time frame, where that particular depression is a bit ugly, and it's got a number of frontal bands that are coming through. The first one being Saturday, it looks like. And those winds, northwesterly, typical winds preceding these bands, getting up to 30 knots and probably higher gusts. In that low itself, we've got a fair amount of wind. Now, that's going to track south-southeast, according to GFS, and you can see that on your grid, I think. So that's going to track toward the Taranaki area, which is good, in that it's not going to stay north a bit. But then the secondary front comes through, and that front goes all the way from the Kermadec all the way up toward the Newcastle area. And that's preceded again by the northwest and succeeded by the west-southwest winds. So there you go. You could possibly ride that one out if you want to put up with that. So that's what I see there. Over.
Thank you very much. I'm looking at it again. That's looking we'll wait another day or two and see what happens. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Yeah, good idea, because you've got a pretty big catamaran there to meander through that sort of weather. All right, just if you could just flap your ears, and I'll call for anybody else, and I might need a relay, Chris. Anybody else for Gulf Harbour? Well, good morning, Alan. Your ears must have been burning because we had Trevor and Jan visit yesterday, and we were wondering where you were. Whereabouts are you? Over. Well, Contessa has faded away. Maybe he's underwater. Chris, can you hear where he is? Over.
I got a very loud call down in Contessa. Go ahead, what's your position? Over. Wrong forward, something like that, over.
West of Rarotonga.
Okay, I've got west of Rarotonga, is that correct, Roger?
So he's underway.
I thought he was. Yeah, I've got that. Thank you. I thought he'd gone to Tonga, so that's good to correct that. So he's west of Rarotonga somewhere. Boy, I tell you what, I hope the top of your list is to look at the entire radio system when you get back to New Zealand, Alan, because it's really way worse than it used to be. All right, so you're west of Rarotonga. Let's see if we can work out your destination. I suspect from Denise's email that you might be going Rarotonga to Minerva, but I will put it back to you, and if you could let everybody know where is your destination, and I'll rely on Chris to give me a relay. Quintessa, go ahead. Okay, Chris, I did hear that he's headed to Minerva Reef. I didn't hear the bit that came after that, but can you add anything to that, please? Trigger, go ahead.
Correction, he has left, he has just left Rarotonga. The destination is Minerva. He asked that you send an email to Denise to confirm that he has just left Rarotonga. Thank you, over.
Oh, Roger. Yep, no problem. Okay, we'll look at certainly doing that straight away. And David's just looking at getting from Rarotonga to Minerva, but you just basically put up with what you've got. It actually looks quite decent out there at the moment. I'll just see if he's got any comments.
Yeah, all right.
Yep, it's all right, says he. So you'll deal with it. All right, no problem at all. And we'll try and get better copy tomorrow to get some progress. All right, I think that's about it, but I'll just do a pause in case there's anybody else.
Light air.
No, nothing heard, and Alan will have a pretty much of a light air sail there. That'll be a pleasant change probably, and we will be back again tomorrow. We'll enjoy our grey day here. You all will enjoy the weather up there. It's hard to copy on streaming the question. Could you repeat the question when you have it? Oh, okay. The question was talking about the passage south, Max, but you don't have to get the answer today because there's not much light at the end of the tunnel at the moment. So have a good day, everybody, and we'll be back again tomorrow with an update, although it doesn't look as if there's going to be an awful lot of change, but who knows. Cheers all. Have a good day. We're clear. Go ahead, Chris. Well, we're thinking at the end of this week because there's very, very few of you out there, and most of you have email if need be to get in touch with us for anything. So I think we're still looking at the end of this week. Yeah, David's nodding his head sagely. End of this week. Over. Okay.